was ready to get on an airplane and kill because they were taking my baby away from me.
There were a lot of things. I mean, movies are business also.
In the long history of behind-the-scenes Hollywood chaos, few stories match the drama surrounding the firing of Richard Donner from Superman 2.
One of the great crimes in movies was that he didn't get to finish it.
And everybody was pissed off.
There are different sides to every story.
A film that was part of a groundbreaking production spiraled into an ongoing feud between a director and his producers.
Spengler, all these people, I don't think they had any concept of what the film would be.
You just lay there and scream and hit the wall.
Leading to major changes in the film, cast boycotts,
We just didn't want to go back.
and a legendary alternate version that took over 2 decades to finally see the light of day.
I didn't know what to expect.
Farewell forever, Kal-El.
Oh, put that back in.
Now, to properly understand how this battle began, it's important to go back a few years before Richard Donner was even involved with the production. In 1973, producer Ilya Salkind had an idea that most of Hollywood at that time wouldn't even consider: put a comic book icon on the big screen in a cinematic blockbuster.
Ilya came up with the idea, actually, of said, hey, what about doing Superman? Well, it's gonna be expensive.
It was entirely uncharted territory, but Ilya brought producer Pierre Spengler on board and managed to convince his own father, veteran international producer Alexander Salkind, to back the project.
My father, Alexander Salkind, really had this extraordinary talent to find money. And also he had an incredible charm, and he would hypnotize people when they would give checks.
But even with Alexander Salkind's charming personality, getting the funding in place for a Superman film was not easy. To give the project prestige, the Salkinds and Spengler hired the Godfather author Mario Puzo to draft an ambitious script.
That was a 500-page script. It was an absolute saga, and definitely 2 movies. By getting Mario Puzo, of course, the movie immediately started to exist.
For director, they landed James Bond veteran Guy Hamilton to helm the 2-film production.
Puzo, Guy Hamilton, Bond, Godfather, yeah, that sells, because I would adapt myself to the mentality of the buyers.
After a couple of drafts, Mario Puzo stepped aside, and the Salkinds brought in screenwriters David and Leslie Newman alongside Robert Benton. And despite having a completed script and a director, the producers still faced a massive financial hurdle. Prospective buyers and studios weren't taking this superhero movie seriously without a marquee superstar attached to guaranteed ticket sales. But that was about to change.
This agent, Kurt Franks, calls me, and he says, Ilya, I can get you Marlon Brando, Make me an offer now, make me an offer.
Brando's record-breaking deal, a reported $3.7 million plus back-end profits for just 12 days of work to play Superman's father Jor-El, became the project's ultimate catalyst.
The moment Marlon Brando said yes, Gene Hackman wants to be in the picture, Warner Brothers very quickly said, we want the picture. Marlon was the crystal that made this, the crystal like in the film, that made this happen.
When reflecting back years later, even Richard Donner acknowledged the backbone to even try and get Brando for the film.
Would I have cast Marlon Brando in that role? I don't know. I don't think I would have had the guts to. Because they did, I will forever be thankful.
But even with this positive momentum for the film, the challenges were far from over. The Salkinds spent millions of dollars in pre-production, with elaborate set builds already underway in Rome.
We had already spent millions between Puzo, the writers, between Hamilton, between the living expenses.
To save money on taxes, the production was relocated from Italy to Pinewood Studios in England, a move that triggered another problem. Now, because Guy Hamilton was a United Kingdom tax exile restricted on how many days he could work in England, moving the production to London meant he could no longer direct the movie. With millions already sunk into development and massive sets waiting in England, the Salkinds and Spengler suddenly found themselves without a director to helm the biggest gamble in cinema history. With the pressure mounting, Ilya Salkind received a tip from his ex-wife about a potential director.
My first ex-wife, Sky Aubrey, she said to me, look, I know this guy, he's terrific, Dick Donner, he's a funny guy, and he looks like Clark Kent. And I said, yeah, well, what has he done? He said, well, The Omen.
In addition to directing The Omen, Donner had gained notoriety with television dramas, directing episodes of The Twilight Zone, The Fugitive, and Kojak.
I love you, baby.
With Dick Donner now on board to direct, he quickly realized the production needed some major changes, starting with the test footage shot by Guy Hamilton.
I cannot talk for Guy Hamilton, but he saw the picture different than I did. There was not one piece of preparation of that year that they had on the picture that I could use.
The next problem was the gigantic 500-page script and its over-the-top, humorous tone.
It was like that big and had all this goofy, silly stuff.
I remember Superman going around New York at one point, and they ran into Telly Savalas. Kojak was on the air then, saying, "Who loves you, baby?"
Ilya Salkind has since claimed he was strictly opposed to a campy style for the film.
There were a couple of scenes that were camp. A scene where Lex Luthor was eating Kleenexes all the time. That was gonna go in a minute.
But this feels like a bit of revisionism on his part, given the goofy nature the franchise eventually took.
Their approach was kind of a parody on a parody. So I took the picture really because I felt this stupid necessity to keep Superman clean.
Now, Richard Donner has said he had to push the Salkinds to make the film in a style that treated the overall story of Superman with respect.
It was Americana. It was our little moment in history.
Donner looked to his screenwriting friend Tom Mankiewicz to help with rewrites, but Mankiewicz was still in need of some convincing to come on board.
And there's Dick on the lawn, dressed in the Superman suit.
And I just came running across the lawn. Tom thought I was nuts. I really thought I could fly.
I started laughing, and we sat down and started talking, and he sucked me in, and off we went.
Together, Donner and Mankiewicz established a guiding philosophy: verisimilitude, treating the mythos, characters, and physics of Superman's world with dramatic gravity.
Siegel and Schuster, they treated him as a reality, and that's where my verisimilitude came in for every department in the making of the picture, that they had to find this reality.
But a guiding philosophy for the film would mean nothing if they didn't have the right man wearing the red cape. To find Superman, the producers considered everyone from high-profile Hollywood actors to complete unknowns.
I mean, we were going completely nuts to get the right guy. We even tested the dentist of my first ex-wife.
It's all over, Luthor. You're coming with me.
Now, despite such a broad search for the film's lead, Donner wanted to narrow things down by ruling out all the big-name options.
I just couldn't see Redford, any of those guys in blue tights, flying around New York and being convinced, oh, it's Robert Redford, not Superman. So I really wanted an unknown.
The search eventually led to the casting of Christopher Reeve.
But I think that if somebody had ever told me that one day I would dye my hair black and wear red boots and play a man who flies around and lives by the North Pole, I would have had to say, okay, that could be fun.
Christopher Reeve is Clark Kent and Superman. Nobody better could have or will be Superman.
With the right man cast as the film's hero, there was still the challenge to make audiences believe he could fly.
If I couldn't convince an audience that this flying was real, you didn't have a movie. Then he went back to a TV show where he jumped out the window and he was on a board. So when they showed me their tests, he jumped out of a window and he was on a board. I said, you guys are kidding.
It was an absolute nightmare to make the man fly. Absolute fortune to get there.
When we saw Christopher Reeve fly for the first time in dailies after a year and a half of trying to get it to work, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. I mean, he flew. He actually flew.
While progress was being made, the production was still being challenged with the unprecedented task of filming 2 feature films at the same time. But Donner was up for it.
If you're doing one, hell, just as easy to do 2. It's just that much more footage. Every time we had a set, like Fortress of Solitude, we try to do everything in that for both pictures. So once you were done with that set and those actors, you were done.
But the costs were getting difficult for the producers to contain.
The tension started to escalate because, of course, the budget was going completely out of control.
I think Ilya wanted to make a movie. I think his father and everybody involved, they wanted to make a movie, but they wanted to save every single penny they could and not spend it.
Dick never, in the course of the picture, got a budget. He was constantly told that he was over schedule, way over budget, but nobody told him what that budget was or how much he was over that budget.
I was ready to walk out so many times I can't tell you. But I had taken on the project of making Superman, and damn it, nothing was going to stop me.
As filming for Superman continued, communication between Donner and the producers was getting worse and worse.
It got so bad, I couldn't stand the sight of them, quite honestly, and I just, stay away from me. Stay off the goddamn set.
To bridge the gap with Donner, the Salkinds brought in Richard Lester, a film director they'd worked with in the past, who was meant to be a go-between for Donner and the producers.
He came on the set one day and he said, I'm here to be a go-between. Nothing more than if you have something to say to them, say it to me and I'll tell them. I said, look, I don't need you in the process of making the film, but that's great because I really don't want to be involved with these people.
But some on the production saw Lester as a possible replacement director waiting in the wings.
I remember when we were on the set one day and I saw Richard Lester coming on the set with the Salkinds, and I said, something's not right.
And my theory was they were clearly waiting for Dick to either quit or to get so obstreperous that they were going to fire him, and then Dick Lester was going to take over.
It was never in the idea of anybody that Richard Lester would do the second film. I mean, it was like, we planned to have Richard Lester direct the second film. It makes us look like these schemers, which we were not.
By late 1977, as mounting delays threatened the release of the first film, the Salkinds made the drastic decision to halt production on Superman 2 entirely.
We literally ran out of money, and Warner Brothers said, let's put the first one out and see what we've got.
That decision put the sequel on hold, despite Donner having already filmed an estimated 75 to 80% of its footage.
We had finished everything with Brando and Hackman, and we realized that if we were going to make the date, we had to concentrate on one.
Another major decision was taking the planned ending for the second film of Superman reversing the rotation of the Earth to turn back time and using that in the first film.
The original end of one was Superman getting rid of those deadly missiles, and he threw one into space and hit the imprisoned 3 supervillains and released them.
From the story to the performances to the film's musical score, Donner was extremely happy with the end result.
When Superman comes up on the screen, all of a sudden the music went, Superman. It actually said, I heard it say Superman.
After years of chaos, studio battles, and frantic deadlines, Superman finally premiered in December 1978.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me? Who's got you?
The film became a massive worldwide success.
And I repeat, everybody was hugging and very, very, very close at the different premieres.
I was very, very, very proud of the picture, and not in its size and the fact that it was the #1 for Warner's or any of that stuff, the fact that we pulled this off. What's the feeling when a film opens and it goes through the roof? You're part of it. You're going right up through the roof with it.
With the first film a major hit, Donner seemed to feel he'd earned the right to finish the sequel on his own terms. In written interviews, he accused producer Pierre Spengler of having no real understanding of big-budget filmmaking, claiming the need to actively work around Spengler's decisions just to keep the production from collapsing. Variety reported that Donner would only come back if Spengler was off the project, saying, if he's on it, I'm not.
He quite flippantly declared that if I, Pierre Spengler, was on the film, he, Richard Donner, would not be.
Not wanting to work with Pierre, who was my childhood friend and also had started working with my father and myself very, very young, was a bigger problem.
And if the gentleman didn't want to work with me, then we had to find someone to replace the gentleman.
In any event, I said, look, we should take another director. And it was an incredibly difficult, crazy decision.
On March 15th, 1979, Donner received word he would not be finishing Superman 2.
And I never even heard from the producers. I heard from a lawyer or somebody said, your services will no longer be needed.
To replace him, the Salkinds did end up turning to Richard Lester.
Richard Lester was taking over the film. I was so pissed off.
Richard Lester came in to do a very complicated gig. The Salkinds had chosen him because they knew that he was an economic director who could bring things in on budget.
I tried to write or reshape the existing screenplay so that there was so little special effects within that sequence that the actors could perform in a naturalistic manner.
But the battle was far from over. First, bringing Lester on board for the sequel created a major union hurdle. Under Directors Guild of America rules, a replacement director could only receive sole credit if they shot at least 40% of the completed film. Because Donner had already shot around 80% of Part 2, Lester couldn't simply edit Donner's footage and shoot the remaining scenes. He was legally required to redo large portions of the movie himself to secure the director credit. But the idea of rewriting and refilming major elements of Part 2 did not sit well with the cast.
It wasn't the fact that we didn't think Richard Lester was a great director. It was like Richard Donner's project. We just didn't want to go back.
Others weren't as polite with how they viewed Lester as a director.
With Dick Donner, you find things. There's a family to it. Richard Lester came in. There was nothing close to a family atmosphere. There was nothing close to finding out what works and what doesn't work.
Gene Hackman, out of loyalty to Donner, refused to return to set or participate in post-production dubbing.
It's a getaway.
Getaway.
Right.
Ilya Salkind has claimed that Hackman's scenes were complete anyways, so there wasn't a need to bring him back for additional filming.
Gene Hackman didn't loop himself because he was absolutely busy and he was just tied up with other things, and it was not such a big problem to find somebody to impersonate him, and it worked very well.
But Salkind's statements sound like more revisionism, as the multiple scenes in Superman 2 that use a Gene Hackman body double and voice impersonator come across as awkward and sloppy.
Another small step for mankind.
Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder were not fans of the directing change either.
Richard Lester was a good director and a delightful man, but wasn't quite right for the material. I think he was embarrassed to be doing a cartoon and wanted to let the audience know he was a little bit hipper than the cartoon.
Kidder's vocal criticism reportedly is what led to her role in Superman 3 being reduced to little more than a cameo.
Bye. Bye.
Have a good time.
So I came out in the papers and said, I think they're beneath contempt as human beings. And then they put that on the cover of Time Out magazine and thus blew a lot of parts.
Lead editor Stuart Baird and creative consultant Tom Mankiewicz both walked off the project in protest of Donner's firing.
Dick Donner is my friend. Dick Donner brought me on this project. They fired Dick, and I can't do it.
The producers also made the decision to remove Marlon Brando's completed scenes from the sequel entirely, apparently to avoid paying him his lucrative back-end percentages.
They didn't use Brando in 2 because they would have had to pay him.
The economics were such as to say, well, do we really need Brando? He was extremely, extremely expensive.
Brando's scenes as Jor-El were replaced with Susanna York as Superman's mother, which changed a major theme set up in the first film.
It was set up for Jor-El in the very first movie for all of this to happen in the second, and so it was nonsensical to have it happen to the mother in the second.
And here these people, to save a buck, ruined what could have been something really great.
Now, even though Richard Donner was removed from the director's chair on Superman 2, he was still entitled to the option of receiving some form of credit on the film.
And that's when I said, well, let me see it. I got as far as that, now I remember, the Eiffel Tower and that whole opening. And I said, forget it.
It had become a parody on a parody. It had become a joke on a joke.
But even with all the behind-the-scenes turmoil, when Superman 2 finally hit North American theaters in the summer of 1981, audiences turned out in droves, driving the sequel to over $190 million at the global box office, and making it one of the highest-grossing films of the year.
The movie was a huge success, and what we did, and Lester did, I think, wonderfully, is he adapted the whole second picture. The fact is that we went the comic book thing.
Lester's film shifted the tone, leaning more into slapstick comedy, especially in the climactic battle through Metropolis, with hairpieces blown off by super breath, a phone booth collapsing with someone still inside, and ice cream flung into someone's face.
He kind of reverted back to the face value of the comic book rather than the heart.
And things went even more over the top when Lester had the chance to fully direct the third Superman film. The opening sequence from Superman 3 alone seems to demonstrate everything Richard Donner was trying to stop from happening in the first two films. But Richard Donner's story with Superman was still not over. Members of the cast, crew, and a passionate fan base spread the story of a large amount of unseen footage from the second film that had been locked away in a vault. For over 2 decades, Donner's lost cut of Superman 2 remained a what-if movie.
I never thought my cut would see the light of day.
In the early 2000s, restoration editor Michael Thaw uncovered 6 tons of footage in the Warner Brothers vaults and began lobbying to reconstruct Donner's vision.
I don't think there is a film that had so much footage shot and not used. The opportunity of putting this back together is the best job I could ever have.
Thaw brought back Tom Mankiewicz and Richard Donner to help assemble the reconstructed narrative.
Michael pressured the studio and they said, "Would you like to do your cut?" I said, "Hell yeah."
They restored Marlon Brando's key father-son dialogue scenes with Christopher Reeve.
My son.
They also restored Donner's original ending, recycling the time reversal sequence that had been moved to the first film. Released in 2006, Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, relied primarily on Donner's original 1977 footage, supplemented by new visual effects. Yet, despite its historical importance, the Donner cut should not be evaluated as a complete, polished film. Recycling the time reversal ending, for example, undoes the entire plot of the movie, leaving the narrative on a strange note that everything we just watched didn't actually happen. But what it lacks in structural perfection, it makes up for by finally restoring the mythic, earnest tone that Donner and Mankiewicz fought so hard to bring to the Man of Steel. And while fans will forever debate about what might have been had Donner stayed on as director of Part 2, for Richard Donner himself, the loss wasn't just about a single sequel. It was the early end to a larger story.
We had about 4 stories in our head.
Mm-hmm.
And what Tom and I could have continued, the continuing saga of Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder would have been quite a series of films.